Man, they real man, not with the gay shit. You niggas sick and gross me out, transforming into a bitch. I don't want that dirty pussy, lil' mama, I ain't spending or a trick. Don't need you to put me on, I put myself on. Just came up on another lick. Bills paid, belly full, in lack for nothing. Nigga do me, stay in my lane. Fuck tryna be another nigga with nothing. Brainwashed and continue lied to. Our social media censor everything real good and true destruction.
Humanity is on a collision course with a horrific end. If the common people of the world continue to stall and allow the elite technocratic eugenicists to promote their psychotic agenda and their tentacles in government affecting our daily lives.
We penetrate the cabinets.
Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he bragged how his subversive WEF, World Economic Forum, has, quoted, infiltrated governments around the world. In the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda?
The member was in a really good question there, but the audio is really bad, and the video is really bad as well.
Mr. Speaker, that member was promoting open disinformation.
The World Economic Forum is pushing for a global ID by 2026, fueled by blaming the average citizen for their carbon footprint.
Why is the World Economic Forum bothering with digital identity? Why are we looking into it? Why is it such an important topic for us?
How we construct and use digital identities would determine how people are represented online, what opportunities they have access to, what or who is trusted online.
So it's also a very important tool for financial inclusion.
The starting point where a number of actors, from the international development community and the private sector and everything in between have started to come together to think about what principles should be governing the use of these systems.
Yet, not a word from the Bilderberg attending industries that continue to produce endocrine system hormone blockers within phthalates and bisphenol A in plastics to pesticides in our food to shampoo to receipts to water bottles to electronics to cleaning products and carpets. Regardless of the fact that the chemicals from these industries could wipe out the human race by 2045, as leading reproductive epidemiologist Shanna Swan and her team of researchers found that during the past 40 years, sperm levels among men in Western countries had more than halved and could deplete to zero by 2045 due to the toxicity of plastic.
When did this stuff start getting into our food supply?
The growth of these chemicals tracks with the growth of the petrochemical industry. So back in 1950, there's this better living through chemistry that everyone's talking about, and everybody is just wanting everything made of plastic. That's just one example of the many chemicals that can affect our hormone system.
When waves are breaking, they create these mists, but they're actually transferring microplastics from the ocean into the air that we're breathing.
By analysing air samples from 2 Auckland locations, Dr. Joel Rindolaw's team of researchers calculated that 74 metric tonnes of microplastics drop over the city each year. And it could have consequences for our health because microplastics have been detected in human lungs.
Furthermore, in a recent study, it was observed that the Y chromosome found in the male species is degenerating and will eventually disappear, leading scientists to hypothesize that a new male chromosome will eventually replace the Y chromosome. Meanwhile, the replacement for the labor of mankind is here, as a turning point has been reached in robotic AI technology, allowing robots to see objects of varying shapes and sizes and adjust their grasp accordingly. This will rapidly replace millions of workers. As World Economic Forum tainted areas lead the way on pushing people to commit for merely being a burden on the state.
Imagine choosing death over homelessness. That's what one St. Catharines man is contemplating. Tonight on City News, we continue to delve into medically assisted and how some believe it is their only option to living in poverty.
All of these and many more major crises that face the future of humanity are tacitly collected under the net of the New World Order by its assets in the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. Rather than allow the populace to properly face their fate, the architects protecting global corporate interests pose as our saviors, projecting steadfast organization.
Now the United Nations is warning the crisis has put the world on the brink of a hunger pandemic. 265 million people could face acute food shortages by the end of the year. That is double last year's projections.
While rapidly fomenting order out of chaos, humanity must respond to this new world order dogma or vanish under the boot of the coming totalitarianism.
The International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields has released a study which proves radio frequency radiation is not as harmless as the FCC would like us to think. The study examines and invalidates outdated science from the 1980s and 90s, which was used to try and affirm that radio, cell phone, and 5G radiation was safe. Their publication is meant to show, quote, how the past 25 years of extensive research on radio frequency radiation demonstrates that the assumptions underlying the Federal Communications Commission's and the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection's exposure limits are invalid and continue to present a public health harm. Essentially, in the late 1990s, the FCC and ICNIRP set the international standard for radio frequency radiation limits to protect people from adverse effects. However, these limits were based on studies from the 1980s involving 40 to 60-minute exposures in 5 monkeys and 8 rats, a relatively light exposure time compared to today's world of cell phones, Wi-Fi, and now 5G radiation emanating all around us. Then in 2020, in light of new research on the harms of radio frequency radiation, the FCC and ICNIRP reaffirmed the safety of radio frequency radiation based on the same studies from the 90s and 80s. Clearly, they aren't actually concerned about public health. The group behind this new study was founded in 2021 after they were commissioned through a petition signed by more than 240 scientists who have published over 2,000 papers on electromagnetic frequency, biology, and health. They are calling for an immediate moratorium on further rollout of 5G wireless technology until safety is demonstrated and not just assumed. The scientists who conducted studies in the 80s and 90s assumed many things which the authors of this new study strongly disagree with, given the massive amount of new information gathered today. They assumed electromagnetic waves used in wireless communication don't have sufficient energy to break chemical bonds. They assumed radio frequency radiation could not damage DNA. And they assumed no additional data is needed to examine 5G exposure safety. That's why they continue to recycle the same 30-plus-year-old studies. However, there was a wide range of biological effects of radio frequency radiation that were left completely unexamined, such as DNA damage, damage to the heart, damage to the brain, and even reproductive damage, especially to sperm production. Also, quote, multiple human studies have found statistically significant associations between radio frequency radiation exposure and increased brain and thyroid cancer risk. So why did the FCC and the ICNIRP ignore this information? One of the heart damage research papers cited in the study was conducted by the National Toxicology Program. They exposed rats and mice to cell phone frequencies and found that the higher the dose of cell phone radiation, the more increased incidence of heart damage, brain damage, cancer, and adrenal gland tumors were observed. There was also a significant increase in DNA damage in rats and mice. Other research cited in this study shows that visual learning and memory in lab animals exposed to RF radiation below the supposed safe level resulted in consistent and reproducible decline. According to another research publication cited in this new study, quote, human and animal studies have shown that the testes is one of the most sensitive organs to RF EMF exposures, and that keeping a mobile phone in trouser pockets in talk mode can affect fertility parameters, such as sperm motility fertility, sperm count, and it can even fragment the DNA of sperm. In one study, rats experienced a decrease in sperm count, decreased sperm quality, and the testicular development of rats was impaired. Rats who were exposed to radiofrequency radiation while they were still in their mother's womb. All of this after only 1 week of exposure. In 2009, ICN-IRP claims that radiofrequency radiation was too weak to cause significant damage to DNA. But DNA damage has been observed numerous times in studies cited throughout this publication, especially in the brain cells of rats and mice. Another study even found significant increases in DNA damage in hair cells in the ear canal among 30 to 60-year-olds who used mobile phones 10 years for up to 60 minutes a day, when compared to people who don't use mobile phones at all. So, with its higher electromagnetic frequency and shorter wavelength, 5G is supposedly safer than other types of radiofrequency radiation. The waves are said to be absorbed within the first millimeter of our bodies, 86% of the EMF power, with a skin penetration depth of 1 millimeter. However, as the study points out, ultraviolet light, which penetrates the skin less than 1/10 of a millimeter, is a recognized cause of skin cancer. How can 5G be safe when it reaches into our bodies deeper than ultraviolet light? Radiofrequency radiation from 5G exerts its energy into our skin, our extremities, even the reproductive ones, and our eyes. It could even be causing cataracts as well as skin cancer. Who knows how deep 5G is really going? Just as the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields has called for, the rollout of 5G should be stopped and studied further, taking into account the information provided in their new publication. Quote, because there are no adequate studies on health effects from short-term or long-term exposures to 5G radiation, in animals or in humans. With what we do know about the negative side effects of other forms of radiofrequency radiation, humanity should put a stop to the 5G revolution before it surrounds us with an electromagnetic siege and smothers us to death.
The first generation wireless, 1G, was voice. The second generation, 2G, allowed both talk and text. The third generation, 3G, the internet, in a limited way. And today's technology, 4G, completed that digital migration. But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way.
This video is brought to you by the number 5 and the letter G. And pretty soon, everything else will be too.
I have to tell people 5G is a killer. I'm Mark Steele. Anybody who hasn't heard me. I'm a weapons systems head-up display expert. I'm one of the leading experts in the world. I've actually brought cover in relation to this, and the reason I became an expert was because I invented them. What I'm going to say to you today, do not believe a single word I say. Not one. I want you to do your own research. You'll find it's absolutely terrifying. You got your body card? Aye. Oh, good lad. Right, because I can talk to that. This 5G rollout is a weapons system. I've got a letter with central government because I know about weapons systems more than anything other.
In Britain, in a place in the north of England called Gateshead, a scientist there called Mark Steele has been very publicly and actively warning people about the effects of LED streetlights, which he says in Gateshead are emitting now 5G.
Right, what's the crack?
Hey, lads. I'm just having a word with these Gateshead council workers about replacing these transmitters on these lights that are causing harm and assaulting the community. This is an existential threat to the economy, to the environment and humanity.
If these transmitters are everywhere, then everyone's at risk, surely.
There's a lot of confusion about what 5G is. The G stands for generation. So you started off with the first transmitter system.
Back in the 1980s.
In the 80s, yeah. So you had 1G, then you had 2G. And as the generations moved on, you started to see more complex signal systems, cleverer pieces of antenna designs, etc., etc. So the whole thing became more data, quicker downloads, etc., etc. However, 5G is something completely different.